Hello everyone, my name is Suzanne Sankisi-Frey from Forest Research. This presentation is part of the Observatory Volunteers Training Programme for 2016 and it's about the pine processionary moth. So the pine processionary moth is a moth that is similar to the oak processionary moth, and you can see an adult moth here on the right hand side. They have cream forewings with brown markings and white hindwings, but to an untrained observer they are difficult to distinguish from other species of moth. On the left-hand side you can see the larvae, or the caterpillars, of the pine processionary moth, which are hairy and coloured orange-brown with blue bands. So like its close relative, the oak processionary moth, the larvae move around in nose-to-tail processions. So the host trees are pine trees, including Scots, lodgepole and Corsican pine, and also European larch. And we have extensive plantings of all of these species here in the UK. So how does this moth affect its host trees? Well, its caterpillars or its larvae feed on the needles of the pine trees, and in large numbers they can severely defoliate the trees, weakening them and making them more susceptible to attack by other pests or diseases, or to environmental stress such as drought or excessive moisture. So like the oak processionary moth, the pine processionary moth caterpillars represent a public health hazard because they are covered with dense clumps of hairs containing an irritating protein. So these hairs can be blown by the wind into contact with people and animals, resulting in painful skin irritations and rashes, and in some cases allergic reactions. So please do not touch or approach nests or caterpillars yourselves, and instead report to us as soon as possible through Tree Alert. So the pine processionary moth is native to the Mediterranean region, North Africa and some areas of the Middle East and Southern Europe. So luckily it's not actually here yet, but it has been extending its range across Europe towards the English Channel, so it's heading our way. So the pest is not established in the UK, but we have had one transient population of larvae, which was found in a UK nursery in 1995 on Scots pine plants, which had been imported from Italy the year before. So this outbreak was successfully eliminated, and we've also caught an adult in a light trap in Berkshire in 1996, but the origin of that moth was never traced. This slide shows the life cycle of the pine processionary moth. So the adults emerge and fly in the summer months. The adult moths live for only about 1 day in the summer, and during this time they mate and lay eggs as egg masses in pine trees. So the larvae hatch in the autumn from the eggs laid in the summer and begin feeding on the tree's needles in the autumn. And then they build tent-like nests in January. So the caterpillars overwinter in these nests high up in the pine trees, and they form processions on the ground in early spring before pupating in the soil until late summer, when they emerge as adult moths. This pupal stage can, however, remain dormant, extending the life cycle for over 2 years. So what are the signs and symptoms of this moth? Well, the main ones are the caterpillars that form processions, and damage to the needles caused by the larvae feeding, and also presence of nests in the pine trees. On this slide you can see the caterpillars of the pine processionary moth forming a nose-to-tail procession. So the pine processionary moth caterpillars are most likely to be seen processing in this way in the winter months and early spring. Another of the main signs and symptoms of the pine processionary moth attack is discoloration and defoliation of the needles, which results from the caterpillars feeding. And you can see this discoloration here on the slide. The extent of damage depends on how heavy the infestation is, with high levels of infestation resulting in complete defoliation of the tree. Another major sign of the moth, and something that we can look out for, are these nests that the caterpillars construct high in the pine trees. They are white and silken and tent-like, and they are built around January time. The caterpillars actually overwinter inside them, and they can get to the size of a football. So here on the left-hand side, you can see a fairly fresh nest. It's very white and clean looking and easy to see. There can also be several nests in one tree, and you can see that here on the right-hand side. And here also you can see some very severe feeding damage. Here is another one of these nests, but this time the caterpillars are actually present and crawling around on the outside of it. The caterpillars tend to spend their days inside the nests, usually only venturing out at night time to forage on the tree's needles. Here we have an example of a very early nest, so small and not yet white. Well, you can just about see the white webbing just beginning to build up. And you can see here on the right, where the arrow is pointing, this browning on the needles caused by the caterpillars feeding. So here we have two more fresh nests in the same tree, again looking white and fairly conspicuous. Over time, these nests become damaged and discoloured, and you can see here a nest that has become quite degraded. And here is a very old nest, and you can see that all the white silken webbing has now disappeared, and it looks very different to when it was first built. Other agents can cause similar signs and symptoms to those caused by the pine processionary moth. So various fungal diseases, such as cycloneusma and lophodomela, can cause discoloration of the needles similar to that caused by the pine processionary moth. So they cause a browning and a yellowing, and they can also cause defoliation of the needles too. And also, feeding by other insects, such as the ermine moth and the pine hawk moth larva, can cause similar damage to that caused by the pine processionary moth. Okay, so just a few biosecurity issues now. The pine processionary moth has the potential to be introduced into the UK in the soil of live plants because they do pupate in the soil, and so these pupae can be hidden in the soil around the roots of potted trees. And the biosecurity measures we need to take? Well, we need to follow high-risk biosecurity measures at all times, taking particular care not to remove any tree debris or material from the site, as egg masses and or caterpillars may be present, especially in the early larval stages when they are small and difficult to see. So we really need to be careful all through the summer and through to early winter. And also it's really important not to take any soil off the site, as it may be harbouring pupae. So please make sure that all boots and tyres are completely cleared from soil before you go. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this observatory presentation on the pine processionary moth.